Hello everyone, welcome to Tech Spa. My name is Anush Kumar, Java trainer, 5+ years of IT experience. So this is a advanced Java session 10. So today's class agenda is we will cover what is MVC architecture, okay, and what is Servlet, what is Spring, what is Spring Boot, what is an API, what is REST API, what is Super REST. Okay, so this all thing we are basically going to covered in our today's class. Okay. So, first, moving to class. So, what is MVC architecture? Okay, MVC architecture basically means model, view, and control. Okay, so model basically in model layer we create entity class and write the database logic or interact with the database. Okay, entity class, POJO class, data related things basically are developed inside a model layer. Okay, then we have a view layer. So basically, what happen in view layer? So view layer means your page related thing like UX UI, your HTML page, JSP page. Okay, this thing is basically developed inside a view layer. Okay, that is a front end related thing are basically developed inside a view layer. Okay, then we have a controller layer. So controller basically handle the input and output of your data. Okay, the logic, the backend logic basically we develop inside a controller layer. Inside a controller layer, we will develop an APIs also, how we will interact with the page, how the data will be taken from the database. Okay, that is basically done inside the controller layer. Okay, like there is a client, okay, which basically go to a some page, hit some button or save some data, then the data will basically go from the page form to a controller layer. Okay, from controller layer it will go to there will a method which in service layer basically we develop a method which basically perform data related operation, and that method we basically import in controller layer. Okay, so when the data will come inside here, with the help of method, the data will go to repository layer. Repository is basically a layer which perform a CRUD operation. Okay, with our database. Okay, basically repository layer perform CRUD operation related to our database where we will map the entity class. Okay, so basically this repository we create one interface that will implement JPA repository, a CRUD repository that perform the CRUD operation related to our database, that is DB. Okay, so this is the basically flow. If the request will come from the client it will go to controller, then request will go to service layer. From service layer, the request will go to repository, and from repository layer, the service will go to database layer. In between, we have model layer. Basically, model layer, we create an entity class, and that table will be basically generated. Okay, so this is basically we have in earlier days, uh, we are using that is where is huh. Earlier days we are using servlet. Okay, then we move to the spring framework. Then we currently the Java developers are working inside spring boot framework. So a spring boot framework basically work on MVC architecture. Okay, so what is servlet, what is spring boot, and what spring and spring boot? Let me move one by one. First complete the earlier talk. Okay, so this is a model view controller layer. Okay, this session will be only theoretical. Here we are covering the important point related to our project, related to Spring Boot, so that when we jump into a project, you feel comfortable by understanding the term and terminologies, okay, related to the project. Okay, that's why we are performing this session. So the second class is controller layer in our Spring Boot. Controller layer in Spring Boot. What it is, Spring Boot is we basically follow MVC architecture, and controller layer is the part of MVC model view controller. C represent a controller layer. So it's basically control for creating a controller layer. There are two annotation, that is a REST controller and controller. So REST controller, inside a REST controller layer, we will create an APIs. That API interact with our databases. Okay, and we can access those API in our web servers and access those API with Postman. We can use those API inside our front end page to display a data in front end. Similarly, controller layer is also used to interact with the our pages, display the things that will basically done internally, not it will. Okay. Now, basically, controller layer handle the incoming HTTP request. What is HTTP request? We have get for get the data, post for posting the data, creating a data, then put for update the data, and delete for deleting the data. These are the HTTP requests, which are basically we use inside the REST controller for creating an APIs. Okay, HTTP. Then this service then this controller layer basically call the service layer, where we will create a method, write the logic, and implement those service layer inside the controller layer. Okay, then what is basically service layer? So here we have seen controller layer, where we will create REST controller and controller. Okay, then we will write the method inside a service layer and interact with the data with the help of repository layer, that basically interact with the database. So what happened here? Service layer basically contain the business logic. For creating a service layer, the annotation which we will use is @service. Okay, like in controller layer, we use @REST controller or controller annotation. In service layer, we will basically use @service annotation called by this service layer basically called by the controller, and the service layer is basically interact with the repository. So service layer basically interact with the repository, and how they are interacting with each other? With the help of importing. They are basically we are importing repository in the service layer, and we are importing service in the controller layer. Okay, by creating the object of respective classes interfaces inside this. Okay, we will create a object of repository in service layer, we will create a service layer object in controller layer, and we will start importing it. So with the help of inheritance, and okay, this is the concept of OOPS inheritance basically we are following. So that in this way we are interacting with the different classes. Okay, now service. So what is entity class? Basically, entity class, this entity class here, this entity basically come under model layer, where we create the entity class represent a table in the database. Whatever class we will create inside an entity class, that table will be automatically created in our database with the help of Hibernate. Okay, with the help of Hibernate. So this to create an entity class, we will use the annotation @entity and map this entity class in repository layer. Okay, with the help of JPA repository. That is, entity is basically used inside JPA repository. Okay. Now moving to the next, what is repository layer? So one layer we will make repository layer that interact directly with our database. The annotation which we will basically use by creating a repository layer is @repository that basically extend JPA repository. Okay, and inside JPA repository, we will pass the entity class name and ID data type. It basically repository layer contains that JPA repository contains save method which is built-in method which basically save the data. Find all method will help us to find the all the data, get the all data, delete by ID, find by ID basically help us to delete by ID or find by ID number. Okay, these are the built-in method which are present inside JPA repository. Okay. Then what is the relation between controller, service, entity, and repository? So we have controller layer, that is the entry point, that is a request handler. Okay, that basically will call the service layer. Okay, then service layer where we create our method, create our business logic. Okay, that service layer basically call the repository layer. Then repository layer that interact with the database, data related logic we run right inside the repository layer, that basically directly interact with the DB using the entity class. Entity class basically represent a table structure that is used inside a repository. Okay, that is the this structure we are basically using in Spring Boot application. These are predefined framework which are defined inside the Spring Boot, and we will use this structure only for creating the project and data accessing. Now, in earlier days, we are using Servlet. Okay, then it is updated to the Spring where is here? Servlet, Spring Framework, and Spring Boot. Okay. Now, what is Servlet? Prior to Spring Framework and Spring Boot Framework, we are using Servlet. So what is a Servlet? Nowadays, a Servlet and Spring is not in use. Nowadays, only Spring Boot are used for creating a project in the Java, and all the things we will basically create the project inside the Spring Boot, and with the help of Spring Boot, you will create a microservice and interact with it. Okay, Servlet and Spring Framework is now older version, no longer in use. Just you have to know, for knowing that these are the previous IDE which we are using to create the product for your basic knowledge. Now, no one asks question related to Servlet or Spring. Okay, only you will get a question related to Spring Boot, and we will generally create a project with the help of Spring Boot. So, let me tell you what is Servlet. Servlet is a Java class that used to handle the HTTP request response. In HTTP request response, we are basically use the get method for get the data, post method for creating a posting a data, put method to update the data, and delete method for deleting that. That is a part of Java JEE. Okay, that basically help us to deploy the web server. So what are the servlet filter that are used to intercept HTTP request response before reaching to the servlet class? So basically, this is a filter basically used to filter the data which is coming to the servlet. It is used for logging, authentication, and security purpose. Server filter are used. Okay, it work as a filter chain. Okay, then it is upgraded to Spring Framework. Then what is a Framework? After that, the second framework comes, Spring Framework. So basically, Spring Framework is a lightweight Java framework used to build an enterprise level application. Okay, that supports dependency injection, AOP, MVC, data access, model view controller, data access, aspect orientation programming. The key feature of Spring are loosely coupled. Okay, integrate with the Hibernate and JPA. Now, this is Hibernate is the one concept which are used widely nowadays. Earlier, we are making a database connection. For making a database connection in a Java project, what we are doing, we are importing or installing JDBC driver. Okay. And then we are creating, writing SQL query, interacting with the database with our Java program. Now we do not have to manually import the JDBC connection jar, or we have to manually not we do not have to manually write the SQL query to perform different operation. Okay, with the help of Hibernate, we will create an entity class. With that entity class table will be created in database, and with the help of model layer, they will interact with the database, convert that model layer into SQL, and then in this way we are interacting. Okay, so that is the Hibernate. We will know in more detail what is the Hibernate, how we are basically interacting, what are the. So basically, nowadays we do not have to manually import all the things. Okay, what happened? What is the difference between Spring and Spring Boot? Is basically in Spring framework we have to manually import all the things. Like if we want to use database, then we have to import the database connection jar, okay, and all the necessary things we have to manually import. Then we have to go build path, okay, add the path inside our project. Similarly, we want to run our application, then we have to add the tomcat manually, do the setup, and in this way we are running the application. So this is basically time consuming and hectic. Okay, now, then after in Spring Framework time period, there come Hibernate. So what happened in Hibernate? In earlier, we are basically manually writing the SQL queries. Now, with the help of Hibernate, we do not have to write the SQL queries. What happened here? Basically, a Hibernate is an ORM tool, that is Object Relational Mapping tool. It convert the object entity class object basically into a, we will create an entity class. That entity class object basically will be converted into a table, and that table will be created into a database. Okay. Why we are basically doing this? Because we will avoid writing the SQL query, because with the help of the ORM, we do not have to write the SQL query. Just create the class, create the method, they will interact, and the SQL query will automatically will generate it. Okay. So this is the basically a problem in JDBC. JDBC when we are writing, it increase the number of line of code and maintenance will become difficult. You know how maintenance will become difficult? If I write SQL query for my SQL, tomorrow if I want to upgrade to an Oracle, then I need to change the whole SQL query. But with the help of Hibernate, I means we do not have with the help of Hibernate, we do not have to write the SQL queries, okay, or we do not have to do configuration, okay. That is the transaction is quite easy Hibernate, okay. So that's why we are basically using the Hibernate, okay. So how we are using the Hibernate and how the model layer are created, we will see, okay, in next class. So basically, in short form, Hibernate is a Java framework. What is Hibernate is an open source lightweight ORM tool that used to store, manipulate, and retrieve the data from the database. Okay, ORM. Okay, so Hibernate have the ORM, that is relational mapping. So object relational mapping is the acronym of object relational mapping. It is a programming strategy to map the object which date with the data stored in the database. It simplifies the data creation, data manipulation, and data access. Okay, this is the Hibernate. Okay, because Hibernate is open source, lightweight, fast performance, data independent query means you do not have to write the database specific SQL query. Automatically, the table will be created. Okay, you do not have to write the query for creating table. Automatically, the table will be created. Okay, in model layer, whatever the entity class you will make, automatically a table will be created. Okay, whatever the method or class you will make for getting the data and everything, automatically the query will be created. Okay. Okay. So this is the simple. So this is the Hibernate. So this is what is the problem in Spring Boot? We have to manually import and add the libraries and all. And for running, we have to configure the Tomcat servers to running on. But this is the thing. Okay. But with now this is Spring Framework is older version. Currently from 2000 from 2022 onward, the Spring Boot has come into the market, and now all the companies are basically working on the Spring Boot frame. Okay, the Spring Boot basically an upgrade version of the Spring framework. Okay, so basically Spring Boot basically follow a MVC architecture, that is a model view controller architecture. Okay, it is an extension of the Spring to simply configure and set up. Basically, in Spring Boot, we do not have to manually configure thing. We will just add the dependency. It will automatically add the all the necessary package dependencies and all. Okay, manual. Okay, automatically will configure all the things when we start our program and allow you to create a standalone web application with embedded on here. Also, we do not have to add the Tomcat server. You will build in. Okay, and it will run your application. The feature it have XML configuration, Spring Boot application starter. Basically, this is the main annotation which will start your application. Then we have auto configuration, which basically auto configure all the dependencies which we will add. Embedded Tomcat server. We do not have to add the Tomcat in Spring Boot. Built-in REST API support. Okay, we do not have to add the REST API and all. So this thing basically missing in our Spring framework. Okay, this is the thing. Now what is an API? API basically is application programming interface. Okay. So, and a set of API basically a set of rule protocol that allow a software component to communicate with a database. Means with the help of API, we can get the data which are stored inside a database inside the table. Okay, and we can use the API anywhere from the server. We can use an API if the API is public. Okay, then we can access those API, get the data from anywhere with the help of the web server. In web app, it is a set of URL. Okay, this is a set of URL through which you can perform the action related to the HTTPs like get, post, put, update, delete. Okay, that is the basic thing. So now this is an API, and there is a one form of type or form of API that is called a REST API. REST represent a representational state transfer. Okay. REST API follow the REST principle using the HTTP method to access the resource. Means REST API basically follow the HTTP method where you can perform this operation like get operation to get read the data, get the data, post operation to create, put operation to update, and delete for deleting the thing. So that is basically a REST API. REST representational state transfer. Okay. So we will basically create a REST API in our project. Okay. So what is the difference between the REST and SOAP? Okay. So these are different older version. REST is new version API and SOAP is the older versions of URL. So basically REST follow HTTP, SOAP also follow HTTP, and SOAP follow SMTP. Okay. REST REST can expose the data in XML and JSON. Okay. And SOAP can expose the data in XML only. The rest is basically lightweight and faster, more flexible. Okay, REST API we can use in web services, mobile app. Okay, but SOAP basically use XML only. It is not lightweight. It is strict. SOAP is lower, and SOAP basically use it for enterprise level integration. Okay, so that is the difference between REST and SOAP. This is basically interview question. That's why I am covering this. Okay, now what is the flow? If interview ask you what is the flow of the in your application, so generally all application the same flow is basically happening. You can tell that front end layer, that is from view layer, if the request is coming to the controller layer, after controller layer the request is going to service layer, the request is after service layer the request is going to repository, that is basically interacting with the database. Okay, then the data will be retrieved, it will go to repository, then service, then controller layer, and then to front end. So this is the basic flow of any project, Spring Boot project. Okay, so you can tell in this way. Now let me show you uh, practically the things practically. Okay, so let me. I have one project that is a Ducat. Okay, you can see it. A Ducat is a project. Okay, okay. This is Ducat. Then you can see src.main.java. Click src main.java. So you can see inside src main.java, you have one package. Okay, this package basically is created automatically when you will create the project, and this name Ducat application is the main class. Inside the main class you have the main annotation. Okay, this is basically annotation is helping to run your entire application. Okay, this is the main method. This is basically running your project. Okay, this is just overview. From tomorrow classes we will create a real application. Okay, this is just for making you familiar with the what are the terms related to the project. Then we will create a one controller layer. Inside controller layer we will create a REST controller. This is a class name, user controller, and this is a REST controller because you have seen the annotation is at the rate REST controller. And okay, this way is basically creating up. Remove this. You can see post method is used for save the data. Get mapping is used for get the data. Okay, a get by ID. This is basically an API. These are basically an API. Delete by ID is basically an API. Save is basically an API. Okay. Get is basically API. It will get all the data. Okay. Then similarly, we have a controller layer. The controller layer here is basically interacting with the pages, home page. This is home page. Okay. Now we have a entity class. Basically, the with the help of 500, automatically the table will be created of the entity class. So this is entity class user. So this table will be created in database. Okay. So this is the where we these are the variable ID, name, city will be created in MySQL. So MySQL. Okay. Then we have this is first we will go to service layer. This is a service layer where we are creating the interface. Okay, here we are using interfaces. Here the oops concept, and then this is a parent. Okay, interface. Then this is a implementing those interface with the help of inheritance. Okay, Then we are overriding those methods and writing the logic here like repo.save will basically save the data. Okay, find all, this is a method, will find all the method, find by ID, this is the service layer. Okay. And here is a repository layer. This repository layer basically interact with our database that will basically extend the JPA repository. Inside we have the pass entity class name. Okay. And this is the method which we have created. Okay, so this is the overview. Okay, now what happened? It is attacking again. One more thing. This is a controller layer. Okay, and this is a service layer. We have created find all method. Find by ID method means it will find the data by ID. It will save the user, means save the all the user which we create, delete user will delete the user. Okay, so basically service layer is contacting with our controller layer. Like you can see save user method. Okay, basically we are using inside the controller layer. Okay, that is the use. Similarly, in our service layer we are using a repository layer. Okay, a repository layer is basically interacting with the database, help us to retrieve the data. Okay, so that is the thing. Now this, then we have src.main.resource. Okay, src.main.resource. This is static. Inside static folder, you can keep the image, CSS file, JavaScript file. Okay, inside template, you can add your HTML page. Okay, in application.property, this is application.property. Here, what we will do here, we are basically this line of code which you are seeing here, not this three line is this three line of code basically help us to interact with the database. Okay, this here JDBC MySQL localhost 3306 port number, database name is demo, username is root, password is unusable. Okay, and this line of code, that is spring.jp.hibernate.ddl-auto, basically will automatically create the table of entity class. Okay, and the okay, so this four lines basically help, these three lines basically help us to interact with database, and this line basically help to implement the hibernate and create the table automatically. Okay, so this is the overview of src.main.resources. Okay, then src.test.java is basically is used for JUnit testing. Okay, inside src.test.java, we will do JUnit testing related thing. Means we will test the our whatever we have developed inside a controller layer, service layer, we will test inside this. Okay, and then Maven dependencies, all the dependencies which we will import inside our project will be here. You can see inside Maven dependencies. Then SRC, this is a SRC folder. Inside SRC we have main. Inside main we have a web app. Inside web app we have web INAP. Inside web INAP we have JSP file. So these are the JSP pages here. Okay, JSP page, which basically help us to interact with the databases. Okay, okay. Then we have in last we have pom.xml. Okay, this pom.xml basically is a file where we have all the dependencies. Let me tell you what is written here. Okay, first, this is a model version, means which version your project is currently using. That is 4.0.0 is the version of the Spring framework. Okay, this is a model version. Then this is a Spring framework, a Spring Boot starter parent. The version of Spring framework is 3.1.1. Okay, then this is the project name Ducat. Image name is snapshot. Name is Ducat. Project description. This is okay. Java version using inside the project is 17. Okay. This format which you are seeing is here. This format, this format basically a XML. This is in XML format. Okay. This is in XML format. Then these are the dependencies. The dependencies which we will use while creating the project. That dependency will be imported here, and it will basically pom.xml dependency will be here. It will automatically, when we start the project, it will upload all the dependencies. Okay, like Spring Boot starter web, Spring Boot dev tool, okay, Spring Boot starter.jpa that will import JPA repository. Web starter web will help us to create an APIs. Spring Boot dev tool will be live upload the project. Okay, do not we live upload the project means when we are running the our project in server, then we do not have to every time refresh the things. Okay, it will automatically refresh. Then this database dependency is here. MySQL connector jar is automatically okay. So this way. And previously we have to add all the package. Here we first import the dependencies, and this will automatically import all the package related to MySQL starter test. Okay. Yeah. And this is the thing. Okay. So this is a pom.xml file. Very important file. Okay. Now close all. Now I will show you what is an API, how we are accessing the APIs. src.main.java. Inside this, we will create a controller layer, entity package, entity class, repository package, and inside this repository interface. Then we have service layer. Inside we have a service interface, and service interface. I am implementing this service. So we have this as a user controller is a REST controller. Inside REST controller, we are basically developing an APIs. Okay, this is a class, and these are the method. Post mapping basically used for save the data. Get mapping used for get the data. Let me first start our project. Click on the project. Go to here. Go to run as. Click on Spring Boot app, and your project will basically start in this way. It will start in this. Okay, now it has been started. From here you can click, then the project will be stopped. Okay, and you can also start your project from here also directly. Here also you can stop the project. So you can see Tomcat started on port number 8080. So here the port number is 8080. In MySQL the port number is 3306. Okay, so then how we are basically what is API? I want to first tell you what is an API. So okay. This thing basically, this is what you general what you are saying, that is this is a URL. You can share this URL to anyone, and anyone can access the thing. Similarly, in developer world, this thing is basically called as an APIs. So current project is running on the local host, port number 8080. Port number nothing but area located permanently to run the program, and we have created here a method with the help of get method, that is a HTTP request. We have created a get. This get is basically an API. This will help us to get the data. Okay, so we will write get and hit enter. Then you are basically seeing what here. These are basically in. This is basically in curly braces. You are seeing it. This is in JSON format, and the pom.xml was this pom.xml was here in XML format. This is the XML format, and and this is a JSON format. Okay, JSON format is much easier to understand. Okay, so these are the data ID one name. This basically help us. This is basically an API. Share this API to anyone. Okay, means when you when this will have, currently your project is running inside your computer, so you can access inside your laptop only. But when your project is hosted in a cloud, okay, then you can share this API to anyone, then anyone can access those API from anywhere. Okay. Currently you cannot share because it is currently running in your system, your PC only. Okay. And this is an API, get API. Similarly, we have a get all API, which is get all. No, get is the only API, not get all. Now, then we have here get get by ID. Okay, get by ID means get slash one. So we will get ID one. Okay, this way we are getting this is the two. I there is nothing two. Okay, there is three. There is ID three. So in this is an API. With the help this API, basically, what is the user API? We have as a backend we have developed an API which is basically getting the data from the database. Okay. Now what it is basically doing here, this API we will share with our front end application. Okay, the front end will this use this API in some button. Okay, like we have these are the button. When we click on this button, they have some APIs related which are linked with these buttons. Okay, when we hit this, the API is generally called, and we get the data related to things, and which is basically display in front of us in this format. So this is basically what we are seeing. This is a front end. Okay, which we are seeing in front of us. Okay, this is the front end thing. Okay, this is the front end. Okay, and front end code is basically written in this is a front end code. Okay, now what is a back end code? You cannot access the back end code, you can access the front end code. How I am access the front end code of this place? Cursor plus u, sorry, cursor plus u, and you can access the front end code of anything which you can see in your web browser. But you cannot see backend code because backend code is written internally and stored somewhere. This is the basically backend code. Okay, and then we have a postman. The postman is basically help us to access the APIs, to check the APIs is working or not, like local host colon 8080 slash get, and the HTTP method is get. If HTTP method is post, will post the data. Just click on send. Now you this thing you are getting. This is basically in JSON format. This is in this way we are with the help of Postman we are checking our API is working or not. As a backend developer, your task is to create an API, check in Postman. Then this is being shared to the front end developer, and then front end developer will basically create the page, like HTML page, whatever technology, Angular, React, whatever they are using. You can click on draw, and this way preview, and this way visualize in this way. Okay, these are the cookies, headers. Okay, this is the advanced thing. Just go down. So this all for today. Now I have given you a small overview of all the things. Okay, this is delete. This is put for update. I will update the thing with respect to ID, get by name. Then we have to pass the name. This is an APIs. Okay, so this is the thing. So this is a small overview. From the next classes, we will actually create a project inside our STTS, that is okay, Spring Boot suite, and we are creating a Spring Boot. We are basically creating the Spring Boot project. We will create the controller layer, service layer, repository layer, connect to the MySQL database, and everything. We will see how to create and how to work. Okay, this class is basically an overview. Okay, so thank you for the this session. Meet you in the next session, and we will when we will move into the practical from the next classes, you will be more clear and very clear. Because why you will clear, we I have taught you what are the terms related to the project. Okay, so you when you will jump into the project, you will not be get confused, you know all the things already. Okay, okay, and while working on the project, I will tell you more advanced thing related to this, and you will be more clear about the small thing. Okay, this is just overview, don't panic. You will slowly know more and more about the each and everything. Okay, so thank you, see you in the next classes. Bye bye.